How's it going?
All right, welcome everybody to this first interview with Trad Queen Story Hour. We're very excited to welcome my pal and former coworker from Timcast, Dane Font, and we're going to be talking about some of the issues facing young men and women and some of the people commenting on those things, and we're going to try to figure out maybe a better alternative to those commentators and a more positive spin on the whole relationship thing. So the emphasis of today's chat is going to be about relationships and the current problems that we see in some of that commentary world. So, Dane, very good to see you again. Haven't seen or talked to you in a while. How's it going with you?
Yeah, nice to see you, both of you too. Everything's going good, honestly. It's a lot of change as of recent. I got engaged. We just moved in together, so it's like new habit, new area, and I guess like some things at work are also like transforming. It's all exciting, but yeah, I guess everything's good on my end.
That's awesome. So things are really looking up for you right now. What would you credit most with that change in your life right now?
Honestly, as cliche as this may sound, as soon as I got engaged, and I literally mean as soon as ring hit finger, and the question of will you marry me, the answer being yes, the calling the father and being like, hey, I'm gonna marry your daughter. I hope that's cool, right? Surprise, I'm family. Like after all that was said and done, in some kind of cosmic oddity weirdness, like a bunch of things in my life just starting, like blessings just kept coming and keep coming, oddly enough.
That's fantastic. I am actually super happy to hear that because I remember when we were first friends, neither of us were really very happy with our situation in life. I had a lot of personal turmoil going on. Thankfully, all of that's resolved for me too. So I feel like Dane and I have really kind of gone through a similar heroes type journey from horribly sad and alone and depressed to very happily in relationships and really well established and really looking at a very bright future. So, Dane, what would you say is probably the biggest mistake you see guys your age making?
I think absolutely the biggest mistake that both men and women make, but I'm gonna lean this a little bit more to men, is the debilitating beliefs. And what I mean by that is a lot of guys, they don't, you know, they don't put in some type of work to get things as they desire them, and they instead put in work for to get things as are convenient to them. And what I mean by that is, if you want, such as I did, and by the way, it took me 30 something years to figure this out. Like, please save yourself some time. If you want something serious and traditional, you must gain it through serious and traditional means. Looking for a wife on Bumble and Tinder is sus, okay? And I smacked my head against the wall a billion times until I finally figured that out. And by the way, with literally everyone in the people that care about me and love me telling me, try church, try this, try that, like try traditional means to get women with values that you desire. It's like, no, I'm gonna take a pick through the liberal hellhole one more time and see if like we can both change each other to perfection. Spoilers, didn't work.
Right. Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people are finding, which is hard to watch, but at the same time, I personally am of the opinion that you have to allow people to learn things for themselves. You can only tell them so much, right? Like people try to tell you, for example, to go to church and try to use a very traditional approach. And you're like, no, I'm going to do things the way society is telling me to do things. And it really was very much a journey of you figuring it out that that didn't work for you and that wasn't going to make you happy. So Do you think that perhaps a ticket out of this mess would be encouraging and finding ways to encourage others to better understand themselves as they go into this search for their soulmate and the perfect other person? Do you think that would be an instrumental tool to making sure that they know exactly what they're looking for, and knowing more than that when they're unhappy? Because it can be very easy to have what's called like a trauma bond, where you're in a relationship with someone
Mm,
and you're like, yeah, oh, I'm so happy in this relationship. And you're like, are you? Because to me, from an outside perspective, it looks like you're in this relationship because you have nowhere else to turn. You have a history maybe of abusive relationships or neglect or something like that. Do you think encouraging people to understand themselves would help fix these relationships problems we're seeing in society?
absolutely. And I don't remember who said this quote, but it's one thing to lie to someone else, and it's a whole nother thing to lie to yourself, right? And here's something I learned that was a real interesting lesson to learn. Um, Sometimes you'll date great people, and it still will not work, and that is potentially the most jarring situation of them all, because you'll be in this situation where, listen, like, this person is good, this person is deserving of love, they've been respectful, they've been to the maximum extent of their ability and mine, that there has been like an attempt to like foster love and foster a friendship, but some things that you cannot look away constantly intervene. And fortunately, in hindsight, the pandemic and the intensity of every single interpersonal relationship, and how every single interpersonal relationship got also intermingled with your, like, very strongly and very by necessity, with your key core beliefs. Like, I think if you didn't know yourself before then, you sure do now. At least for some things, you absolutely know what you will tolerate in a partner, in a friend, in a family member that's gonna orbit you, I think. And so, I guess to your point, yeah, the that kind of fire through, uh I have this word in Spanish.
Trial through fire.
Yeah, trial through
Yeah.
fire. Roce is what I'm trying to say. Like, friction.
Yes.
Also, the trial through friction and the heat of the friction by constant exposure, it'll really make you learn what actually makes you happy and fulfilled. And the moment where you are willing to be like, okay, these things make me happy, but ultimately the whole thing, or mostly, doesn't. And there will be some difficulties in the breakup and the move out and the whatever. But, you know, it's 1 year of being uncomfortable versus a lifetime of concessions that'll never work out for anyone. And again, back to my initial point, this person is also deserving of the love that they desire. And everyone just holding on to this pity party that's not working is an absolute disaster.
Yeah, that is a wonderful point, and something that I hadn't considered is the idea that if you are in a relationship with someone great and it still, for whatever reason, ends up not working, that might be your catalyst to start thinking about working on yourself.
Mm.
So that's something that you took very seriously when we were first friends. You were working out really hard, you were eating really carefully, and really getting into kind of a healthy physical position so that you could kind of start to center your life a little bit. Do you think that contributed to making you more open to having this kind of healthy relationship situation?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Because working out and eating healthy is, you know, is not in the short term as pleasurable as just carb loading and boozing and sodas and whatever it is, like the vice that you desire. But it comes out of like long term self respect. And the short term being uncomfortable, waking up early to work out or going to the gym after working, um, it it gets by far surmounted by the ending results, the endorphins that are released, and there are some tantamount like parallel, similarities to relationships as well. I think, yeah.
Oh, that's a great point. I actually really like that because you used to work out with Andy super early in the morning. There was a gang
Yeah.
of guys from Timcast who would go at like 6 a.m. And I
Yep.
remember Andy would go early in the morning and then he would come back and he'd sometimes go back to bed, sometimes get to work. But it was hard for him, especially staying up late with me and then going in early to work out. But it was awesome for him. He got to see you guys, got to hang out. You called yourself the Hard Boys. It was great.
Yeah.
There were a lot of horrible jokes that went on there that I thought were hilarious. But
Oh, great jokes.
the
Jokes were
best.
great.
The
The
most
innuendo
mature.
was sus, but
Yeah, a little bit suspicious, but it was great because then you also had that camaraderie, which is another thing that can be crucial to developing yourself is to have same-sex friends. And I think that's also something that people tend to throw out. I have a group of ladies that I talk to on Twitter constantly because I went out and I was like, you know what? I really want to make a team of ladies who care about things like motherhood and family and who are really focused on just developing themselves as people and as they try to help and serve their families. And what we have now is ladies who are like expecting babies. We have ladies with, very young children. And we have a lady with, I think, like a 3 and 5-year-old. Really fun, like age ranges and all different stages of experience. So it's so important to have that community. I think that people tend to focus almost exclusively on finding their significant other to the exclusion of having that important community support. Do you think that maybe we should be emphasizing like gym friends and study friends, like book club friends, language learning friends, and other stuff outside of relationships, like romantic relationships? And do you think that would help our romantic relationship situation overall?
Listen, like absolutely. And let me tell you, that was perhaps my most recurring mistake. Was the incessant focus on finding a partner and basically like disregarding pretty much any other form of social interaction. And I blame it obviously mostly on myself, but partially on the circumstance of the pandemic, that you just never knew like who was gonna be a weirdo about interacting and befriending and the mask and all that nonsense.
Yeah.
But it's such a good point. And for the men that are listening to this, if you remember one thing that I'm gonna say, please let it be this. Okay? And for the women as well. Never take advice. This is gonna sound extreme, but I mean this to the bottom of my core. Never take dating advice from the opposite sex. Ever. Okay?
Interesting.
Because women will suggest to you some Disney Channel stuff that if they had happened to them, they would call the police. It's
Oh
this
boy.
romanticized dream, but because we're simply different,
Mm.
and they are trying to seduce themselves by being a woman through like some feminine wiles that I simply and men simply do not possess. And so you're gonna have this strategy that is not in tune to your strengths at all. And what I would advise is that you find a friend that is in a relationship or is in a lifestyle that you would like to emulate. And similar to how you have professional mentors, you have like relationship mentors as well. And that person you ask, hey, how did you meet X? How did you go about approaching X? Like first date ideas, whatever. But ultimately, you always have to structure everything to being the truest form of yourself as quickly as possible. Because I feel like some people, they have these like, I don't remember where I heard this from, but people that are really good at dates are really bad at relationships because that means that they're always on dates because they can never hold someone. You know what I'm saying? Like, so they got
Right.
practice in this one aspect, but not in the other. And it's because they develop this persona when meeting people, this almost this seduction type thing, which I think is more predominant on liberals, as I was in the past, and I was dating liberal ladies, and I was paying 70 and they were paying 30, and there was like all these like hidden resentments. It's like, well, I'm paying the majority, why don't you know acknowledge this like manly side that I'm trying to bring? And then like, well, I'm still paying somewhat. Why aren't you acknowledging this other? So
Hmm.
like it's always some concessions that are never 100, so they're never quite enough. And these unspoken, un like insatisfactory terms that liberal dating sets, that you know they they seem to the outward eyes like, oh my god, these, look at them, they're having a 21st century rendezvous. But in as maybe to a guy like me and men similar to me, there's some insatisfaction to the core of like, this is only a percentage of what I want. This is like a simulacra of the relationship
Hmm.
that I'm trying to get.
It's almost what I want, but not
Uh-huh.
quite. It's like a very like light version.
It's a
That's
dance.
interesting. Yeah, it is. It's not quite right. And I think that people in general tend to feel and to understand that something is off with the way that we're dating. Now, I think this is the case because we have people like Andrew Tate and we have some female commentators. And this is something I want to talk about with you for sure, because you have some kind of interesting takes on the male dating red pillosphere. And I have very spicy takes on feminine
Mm.
anti-feminist commentator. So do you want to get into the red pill thing now? Because you were talking about how you shouldn't take advice from someone of the opposite gender.
Yeah,
But there's some really bad advice from people of the same gender for you and
yeah,
of the same gender for me. So you want to talk about that, and I'll talk about the feminist, anti-feminist, feminine side, and we'll unpack it from there.
absolutely. So I previously said, so take advice from someone whose thing you want to emulate. And that can be a trap when you are young, you got the hormones going, and let's just say you want more than you can chew, right? Because a lot of the red pill, at least in the terms of dating, is this pipe dream that they kind of reference like old historical facts. It's like, well, a lot of men are polyamorous, and women, they don't have like the same desire for variety that that men do. And so like the true way, the true like 4D chess, Giga Chat way of dating is that you have kind of like a main chick, and then you're dating like seven chicks to the side, and
Right.
your main chick is absolutely cool with this because you're a millionaire that drives cars, and you have value, and you're jacked, and you're good at chess, and you're just basically an Adonis of a human being. And so most people, if you're single, you're probably not all those.
Right.
You
Right.
might be some, right?
Yeah, if you're
And
lucky.
right, and if you work on it, it's not luck. It's like if you work on it, like if you work out and you eat well, then maybe you're good looking. And then if you take an interest in people and you listen and you try to get to know them, maybe you're good at seduction and conversation. But the what I've seen from both sides, both from the feminine like pick me side, and from the red pill alpha male side, is that they are both kind of begging this, like, the only way this works is if I get all my concessions. The only way this works is if I get every single aspect of my desires, and my partner makes all the necessary concessions. And it's very possessive, in my opinion, unhealthy and unrealistic. And if you, let's say by upbringing, by religion, by whatever, if you're in an arrangement where that works for you and culturally that works for you, and the people that surround you are down with that, God bless. But like,
Sure.
I'm a child of the internet. You know, I'm a child of the internet. Like I'm terminally online, like most people. But I have, or I'm gonna go back to having like a healthy, like a workout routine, and try to keep communication with friends. Like, I know this is like professional, but like this is keeping in touch with
Right.
friends like you and Andy.
Yeah.
Like is also what we're doing. Um, you know, you I don't quite know how to wrap this idea up, but essentially what I want to say is that the concessions have to come from both ways, and we in kind of the more conservative sides, we kind of blame liberals for having this pipe dream, and then the red pill guys come and they kind of administer this pipe dream, and everyone's like, oh no, that's reasonable, like completely, right?
Yeah. Well, to me, that really sounds like a lot of narcissism that we really should be de emphasizing instead of emphasizing. And I think that's kind of what I feel like Andrew Tate is pushing. I understand that he makes some interesting points that young men want to go with. And he does have like small doses of truth throughout what he's saying. But at the same time, at the end of the day, when your emphasis is on muscles and money and Bugattis and being able to get a bunch of broads around you, you have to stop and ask yourself, is this going to actually give me a deep sense of meaning? And Viktor Frankl, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was one of the he's one of my favorite concentration camp survivors. A lot of my heroes survived hardships just like concentration camps and gulags. And he said when people lack a deep sense of meaning, they tend to distract themselves with pleasure.
Mm.
And that's what I see in Andrew Tate. And to a I don't know that most of his followers are anywhere near as successful in doing what he does as he
Not
is,
at all.
obviously. Right. Because
Not at all. No, I haven't seen anyone from the red pill, whatever dating side that's as interesting as he is.
right.
By the way, like I guess disclaimer, like he has kind of a unknown history of how toxic he really is. With the
Yeah.
whole ladies and his current situation in Romania. Like no one's endorsing that, but people are complex, and despite that may or may not being a fact, he does say some interesting things. He does say some uncomfortable truths. You know, he may embellish with charisma and riz, as the kids call it,
Oh gosh.
but
Another term.
I'm hip with the kids.
Right, right. Me
Uh,
too.
he definitely embellishes a bit, but there is some truth in some things he's saying, and also he is rather critical. Like to get the devil is like he is rather critical if you're like a do nothing dude, which I am as well, and you know you you started this by being like, so you were in a bad place, and then I noticed that you being me started to work out and
Right.
try to develop more friendships and be a little more social. And yeah, because perhaps more than perhaps I wasn't a desirable partner. You know what I mean?
That is an interesting observation, and I really appreciate you saying that because I think that one of the things Andrew Tate is distracting from by telling these guys that they can get what they want by doing what he does and subscribing to Hustlers University or whatever it's called, he's distracting them from working hard to make themselves better people, which sounds so trite when I put it that way, but it is literally, and I do mean literally in the actual sense of the word, the old school sense of the word, one of the most important things you can do to finding that relationship that you actually deeply want. the best way to engage with the world around you is to be working toward your own goals, like making yourself healthier or reading a bunch of new books, learning a new language. There's so many different things that life gives us the opportunity to do. We live in a very gilded age where we can pretty much jump into whatever we decide to with both feet. So that's really awesome. We have all this neat opportunity, but many people get distracted by people like Andrew Tate, and they say, well, this is what I need to do. I need material possessions. I need to look a certain way, and I need to be charismatic and interesting and alluring. No. At the end of the day, what you actually need is to be trying to challenge yourself and make yourself into the person that you will be happy with when you get old. And I think that Andrew Tate ultimately is a distraction. But at the same time, I understand why he exists. He exists because feminism has been so incredibly detrimental to men and to women. And I understand there is this huge backlash
And to
against
dogs.
it. Yeah, to everyone. Let's be real. To everyone.
Everyone.
Yeah, and I don't like the ultimate effect of feminism. And my part of this is going to be talking about some of the feminist pushback to feminism. And we'll unpack that. But I wanted to introduce, before we move into that, something that we have here called the Dot Cam. And this is our little puppy, Dot. Oh my gosh, here she is playing outside. It's very grainy. I don't know if we'll really be able to see it.
Can you hear me
here's
okay?
Andy. Yep, we can hear you.
Hey, Dan,
and
it's good to see you, man.
Nice
We've missed you.
All grainy and whatnot.
Yeah. We're learning.
I have to push back with one thing you said though, Lydia, because
Good to see you, Dan. All right, I'll let you guys get back to it.
Men
Thanks, Andy.
Men do have to get their money up, be more attractive than they. Yeah.
Right.
Like you need that, cause so I see. So I'm a video gamer, card game. Like I'm always gamifying life and things. Okay, and so men and women are different strategies, but we're balanced. And here's the balance: the initial sale for men is more difficult, and that is why you can make it easier by being in better shape, smarter, more financially stable, more socially aware, having a lot of things going on. The more you add, the easier it comes. But once you've maxed out those stats, once you've maxed out those abilities, or the ones that are most in line with your personality, then dating becomes simpler. And for women, that initial aspect is simpler, but okay, are you going to commit to me for life? What? Because men ask to date, but men also ask, I want you to be with me. Like the both those Otises are typically traditionally whatever, like maybe you're, I don't know, you make cheese with your feet and whatever, and your life is extraordinary and different from everyone else, and then congratulations, nothing I've said applies to you, and go on with your life. But to people that live regular lives, it's worth saying that, sure, like, you like really put in the work. Like, do you, because a lot of guys want this like young, hot, interesting, conversational, friendly, somewhat assertive but not too pushy, like chick, like this manic pixie girl, and
right.
Everyone does. So good luck. You got be in battle with all the men for her attention. So
yeah, so I do think that is a serious issue for guys, and I think that Andrew Tate does kind of give young men a voice in that regard, because he kind of makes it clear to them that he understands how hard it is to be a male in today's dating environment. And it's not easy. I understand that for sure. And one of the things that we actually pinned down on Timcast IRL a long, long time ago, a couple of years ago, we were talking about how women start life in easy mode because they're more highly valued by society because of, if you go back to it and trace it out, it is because of their ability to have kids and create more humans going into the future. Young men, on the other hand, have historically been cannon fodder. They've been less valuable because until they reach a certain age and a certain level of achievement, a certain level of actual monetary value or ability to provide, they are considered less valuable. They're not less valuable by any stretch of imagination. Every person has intrinsic worth, blah, blah, blah. I'm super, super pro-life, and I think that very seriously. But at the same time, society doesn't view young men the way that it views young women. And I think that right now, a lot of young men feel very, very bitter about that. And I don't blame them. But at the end of the day, it does suck. I know.
It sucks being fat, lonely, and
like not know how to talk. Right.
You know, like, because you know the depths of your humanity, you know, and no one seems to care. Like, you know.
Right. Well, and I do think that we should put more emphasis on recognizing that young men are at disadvantages that no one seems to care about, which is always been frustrating to me. But what I've run into when I try to speak up on behalf of men is I get a bunch of guys who are understandably upset kind of with women in general, telling me, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just a female. I should shut up and sit down. So finally I was like, you know what? I have brothers, I have cousins, I have friends who are male, but I will go talk to them personally instead of trying to defend masculinity as a whole. And I think that actually might be a better approach in any case, but I do think also that men need defenders from the female side. Now, I say that knowing that what I'm going to talk about next is kind of might make it sound like I'm disagreeing with myself, but I will tell you why. So I wrote an article on Substack the other day entitled The Flip Side of the Feminism Coin, No Better Than the First Side. Because what I've been seeing with anti-feminist, commentators who are female, which you correctly described as the pick-me side, is that what they're doing is saying it's all the other women who are awful. I'm a good one. I'm an ally, which is the definition of pick me. Now, if you guys are familiar, if you're hip with the kids lingo,
as we
pick
are,
me as one is, I'm sure. But just in case you're not totally up on it, pick me means a woman who is hung up on the idea of being appealing to a certain demographic of men, typically, right? And they're trying to portray themselves as basically one of the good ones. This would be like, I don't know, I brought in the component of race because what I see with the anti-feminist female commentators is this kind of Kendi-esque idea that what we really need to fix feminism and that hatred is just more hatred, but in the other direction, and it'll be stronger and better because it's coming from men, and men are so much better than women and do everything better.
You got an incredible quote in here that I want to read.
Go ahead.
It is unethical and, I would argue, culturally suicidal to encourage more division between the genders from any angle.
I believe that from the bottom of my heart. Like, we don't fix division with more division, right? Like, I feel very strongly about this. We see this with the race argument. And I actually did link Ibram Kendi because he said the solution to past racism is more future racism. I'm like, are you nuts? Honestly, I said his laughably illogical, weak idea is that the solution to past racism is more racism because he said, quote, the only remedy to racist discrimination is anti-racist discrimination. The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. Are you kidding? Are you kidding? But when you look at anti-feminist commentators, a lot of the female commentators are basically saying exactly that. Now, I'm not really thinking of any one person in specific, and I know this is a little bit niche. It's just something that I pay very strong attention to because when I was 11, I remember clearly thinking, wait a second, if feminism really cared about women, they wouldn't be telling women that they should be overweight, because these women are not going to see their grandchildren if they're super overweight, so they don't care about women. That's kind of weird. It's called feminism. What's going on here? And then I started to think about, wait a second, all of their ideas are kind of disadvantaging women. I think probably the biggest takeaway that I want to leave everybody with from today's conversation is that there is not a war between the genders, and there should not be. The fact that we think there is because women especially have been lied to on every level pretty much since the time of birth. Now, men have great issue with women, and I understand there are a lot of really bad ideas coming from the female side of the aisle, but let's be fully charitable and let's give them the benefit of the doubt. I think that a lot of the worst ideas coming out of women today is a result of feminist ideology. Simply put, it's been pushed on women for their entire lives. They've not known anything else. No one's ever said, hey, you know what's not real? The wage gap. And then proceeded to unpack it for them with nuance. They're given these very slick, very pat, very black and white solutions. Hey, you know why you're not making very much money? It's because of what's in your pants. It has to occur to someone sooner or later that that's just too easy. Now, I used to work in healthcare, and I know for a fact there's nothing simply explained. Okay? Like what we're seeing right now, we're seeing a lot of this idea that we can just take a pill, for example, and we'll lose weight, or our pain will go away forever, we'll have no more depression, etc., etc. What we're finding increasingly with stuff like birth control and pain relief and antidepressants is that there actually are really big downsides. There are side effects that we never considered. And I think that when we stop and think, hey, you know what? Everything that we look at is multifactorial. That might help us to also think about our relationship to the other gender. Men are not as simple as we might immediately believe. Just because they're not as complex at first blush as women doesn't mean they're simple. We just need to recognize that everyone is human and needs to be treated accordingly. So that's my diatribe about that. My main issue with these anti-feminist female commentators is that they seem to be trying to weaponize the current division between the genders for likes and clicks, shares, and money. Really don't like that. Really, really don't like that. I especially don't like tribalism for the sake of money. To me, that's especially offensive because not only you're not just making money, you are actively contributing to the ripping of the social fabric. And I find that borderline sinful because you're using people as pawns to make your money. So that's my diatribe about female anti-feminist commentators. Again, not really thinking of anyone in specific, but more just kind of having a bone to pick with the whole idea of pushing more of the gender divide that we've seen. So, Dane, what do you think should be our first step to fixing the divide between the genders?
I think, okay, the first way I would go about thinking about that is that similar to the Civil War that we hear a lot, the conversation. There's like the war amongst genders, and my argument to that is that war, similar to how it's not kinetic war, it's kind of information war. The gender war is here, and it's not kinetic. It's not like woman,
right, we're not fighting.
Yeah, no, it's psychological and spiritual. And when you allow yourself to remove yourself from that war, the war is over. Like when you refuse to, when you as a man, you come to the understanding that, there are women out there that don't match with me, and I don't have to make them into anything that they're not, and that's fine. And
Right.
they don't have, and we don't have to have tea. And maybe we shouldn't have had intimacy, and mistakes were made, but you go about your way, I'll go about mine with a lesson learned, hopefully. Once you accept that, once you start letting go of self-defeating untruths or lies, then that is how, the relationships between men and women can heal, I think. And I was telling you before we started recording that some advice that I was going to give is that some liberal, conservative women have some things to learn from liberal women and vice versa. And
Interesting.
the best example that I can give is that sometimes women that are conservative are very fixated in things that are very associated with identity, which is like having the children, having the home, like the what I would say is like the ultimate high level goals, right? And naturally, to have the home, to have the kids, and to have all these things, you need a strong financial backing, a strong spiritual, emotional, and like leader in your man. And it is hard to get there. It is hard to get, like, I am 33. I have been serious. I've been saying, like, seriously working on this since I'd say about like 26 is like the point, at least in me personally, that this sowing my oats, this experimenting,
Right.
with multiple women is not similar to how you like like survivors of hardships. I love controversial figures.
Right.
And I remember Owen Benjamin once saying that he was very successful and he was very good with the ladies, and he would have a lot of like casual sex, and then the casual sex would be done and he'd be like, hey, do you want to come to my grandmother's house for Christmas? Which is
Spicy.
like, imagine asking that to, like a one night stand. It's like, excuse me, what's your name? And this thing that you thought was gonna fill you, you were like, yeah, you just slept with a ton of women, how come not even one stays?
Great question. Yeah.
Like what? Like how? Like what was the benefit of being a player? Like you should, like, it's like to catch a bird or two birds with one stone. So you had like 5 ear, they all poop and they fly away.
Oh my gosh, that's great. I love it.
That's kind of what being, in my experience, very promiscuous was. It was the denial of what I really wanted by what society was telling me, like, real men were doing. You know what I'm saying? Like, real men were sleeping around with chicks that were sleeping around, and you were like, you're up to 20, I'm up to 30. Isn't this insane? And then, you'll see you never, like what I just put like a whole week into talking to you, seducing you, whatever, and like we'll never see each other again.
Yeah.
We're barely human to each other.
That's so sad to me. But I'm really glad that you mentioned the whole sowing your wild oats, doing your own thing, that kind of, Hinge and Bumble, and I don't know why I can't, Match.com. There's one other one, I can't think of the name. I haven't been on these dating apps, thank God. I'm so grateful.
I met my fiance on one. I met my fiance on eHarmony.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yes.
Very cool. I have heard success stories. I had a friend who met her husband on Bumble, and now they have 2 kids. They're very happy. So it's possible. It's not impossible. But you have to know what you're looking for, and you have to tell them up front, I'm really looking for a long-term relationship. I'm not interested in sleeping around a bunch. When we start talking, I want you to know that I'm only going to be talking to you. You should be only talking to me. These things are just so simple and basic that we used to kind of be able to take for granted. The dating app culture has really kind of decimated that, but it's so important for you to prioritize that for yourself and to tell your potential partner that's what you're looking for. But what do you think, guys? Okay, so I wanted to ask you before we go on to this, because you're talking about sowing your wild oats and doing your thing and racking up the body count or whatever it was, unfortunate youth, etc. We all have our regrets, but what do you think was your wake-up call when you were in the midst of that and you were like, you know what? I'm not happy. I'm going to start, fixing everything up and try to make this happen and get married and live a really happy, satisfied life.
It was that in the shows I was watching, they would hook up with these beautiful girls, and eventually one of them would convert into a girlfriend and into a long-standing thing. And I thought that's how you got a long-term relationship. You just had sex with a bunch of chicks, and eventually one's like, "Oh, I really like you," and they're just two different things. The having casual sex muscle versus the fostering something long-term and beneficial. They're two completely different spirits. They're two completely different energies. They're probably two completely different women that you should be talking to, honestly.
Absolutely.
And it was, I guess, when I was like, I've reached a point where I'm not inexperienced, and I'd say I'm probably a little more. This is gonna sound like a humble brag, but it's more of like a humble shame. Like, I'm officially experienced. The oats have been sowed,
right?
And 0% conversion or 1% conversion for a month. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So you saw firsthand, this does not work. Like what we've been told about dating culture ain't cutting it. It's not going to go anywhere.
Didn't work at all.
Right. But you wanted something serious. You wanted to get married. You wanted to have that stable life. You didn't want to constantly be hooking up.
At 25, I wanted the hookup to become a girlfriend at least.
Right. So you thought that would work that way.
Yes.
Okay. That makes sense. So I think maybe the disagreement here is that people tend to think that the hooking up will lead to something serious, ultimately to someone they can marry, if they are the kind of person who's looking for a partner they will marry. There is this misunderstanding that the way to get there is by putting the cart before the horse, by having sex outside of marriage or without the understanding of eventual marriage. Because I was raised in a Christian environment, and there was this understanding that you were going to be completely celibate until you were married. I think that in this current culture, we need to take wins where we can, and we need to just gently push the idea of having that in tandem with the idea of being married, with the understanding of a long-term relationship. I think that asking for total celibacy outside of marriage, or before marriage rather, is currently asking too much, at least for millennials and Gen Z. Would you agree with me? Or do you think we need to push the idea of total celibacy outside of marriage, like, forthrightly? I think it's scary to people. What do you think?
If you can manage it, honestly, all the power to you. But I would say my most successful relationships, there was the understanding that this isn't coming immediately. And they were very forthcoming with me with like, hey, I like you too, but like, it's not gonna happen,
First things first, right?
Haha, very clever, very, very charming of you. It's still not gonna happen tonight. And you're like, really?
What?
Okay. Like, this is not what I'm used to, but like, I like you. Let's go for it. And it was great. It was. I needed that.
That is a very keen observation. I think that sometimes people get into the mindset that it's going to happen immediately. That's just what I expect now. I think we've gone from, people of quality don't hook up on the first date to people of quality, it doesn't matter what they do or when. But I think that if you really want to buck that understanding of dating, you need to have the understanding that it's not going to be the first date. It's probably not going to be the second date or the third date. What you're going to do with that time instead is get to know each other and get to figure out what kind of movies you like to watch and where you like to go in your free time and, all the other normal stuff that comes with dating. It doesn't just have to be diving into bed. And I really think that we can make that cultural change. And I'm so glad that you're getting your own family started. I'm so glad that Andy and I are in a position where we're looking at starting a family. And I think that that's the kind of long-term cultural change that we're going to have to push for. Now, one of the things I think people don't talk enough about is that cultural change, which I think is the only way we get out of this mess. Cultural change, first of all, comes through great hardship. The Greatest Generation, they saw, world wars, they saw the Great Depression, they saw all kinds of serious hardship. And just like my concentration camp survivors, that developed their character and turned them into not perfect, but better versions of themselves than they would have otherwise been. And I have this kind of maybe a little bit countercultural idea that the hard times that I know for a fact are coming, I mean, look at this economy. In this economy, seriously, the hard times that are coming, I think, are going to make us, and to a much greater degree our kids, much stronger. Because what I think the Greatest Generation was the parents of the boomers. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But what the Greatest Generation wanted for the boomers more than anything was for life to be easy. And I'll just leave that there, because whatever you think of the boomers, life was certainly easy for them. Like, good for them. They had everything.
Listen, in an age of ists and isms, I am openly ageist. Like, I am, yeah. Like,
not a big fan of boomers?
No, not at all. Like, I'm sure there's, like, 3 lovely ones. But, as a generation, I think our generation is very misunderstood. And our generation, more than others, is at war with itself. And maybe they all are, but I really feel like the divide into the, what's it called when you just desire pleasure, the hedonist millennials, and the bootstraps, which is a metaphor that I detest. Millennials, it's pretty big, but I feel like boomers as a whole, they're very, very hedonist and very self-absorbed. And a lot of the hedonist millennials I've seen are a result of being ignored by their hedonist parents, and then learning as an example is like, well, life is about disregarding responsibility and being hedonist. Like, my father paid no attention to me. Why should I? Why should I, pay any attention to my self-development? They should accept me as I am.
Right.
Like, I think that comes from that.
I think you might be right. And I think what I see coming from boomers and everything that they've voted for over the past 50 years is hard times. And we're seeing that because I think living in such good times provided to them by strong men resulted in, broadly, I'm not being specific here, just in general, it resulted in weak men. Because good times do make weak men. Like, we know this for a fact. And I think what's coming next for us and for our children is hard times. Now, I am disturbingly excited about that because I know it's going to make strong people. It's going to make me stronger, whether I want it or not. And it's going to make my children much stronger too, because they're not going to have everything handed to them. So I personally am like unwieldly excited about the future because I know it's not going to be easy. And I'm not even trying to put a positive spin on that, actually. Now that I think about it, I think it is overall positive because hard times do make strong men. They just happen to be hard. Thankfully, there's a great deal of purpose and meaning to be found in hard times. So I think one of the greatest things, so I'll go back a little bit. The things that I remember most from my youth was not the good examples or the happy times. It was the bad examples. It was examples of hypocrisy that I saw because I remembered that. Right.
Forever.
So, exactly. You remember it forever and you're like, you know what I don't want to be like? That person. Whoever did that. The person who said, oh, you can't let what happens to you affect your mood, and then continue to do exactly that for like your entire childhood. And you're like, okay, so I'm going to go out of my way to make sure that I actually adhere to the idea that I can't let my circumstances dictate my mood.
So Cernovich has a great quote that I love and I live by, and it's, character is destiny. And so if you are of a character prone to overcoming things, which I know you are, I am not surprised that you see kind of the challenge in the hard times. You know what I mean? You kind of you dare to look it at the face and be like, well, I'll get stronger.
Right.
You know, whatever, because that's your character. And so I think that essentially the black winter or whatever that's coming, that you're forewarning, is a black winter of character. We have a lot of people that they are deeply out of tune with what they are and who they are, and they have no idea that they're that, because what they really are right now is a simulacra of their favorite character. I can't tell you how many Rosses and Rachels and Phoebes I've met in my life. And it's like, oh, you're funny, you must be a chat. Like this show Friends, like, is potentially like the most detrimental piece of media in society.
Yeah.
Because so many people, they just keep wanting to emulate their favorite piece of media. By the way, I am guilty of this myself, and I have been, and I've had to check myself, you know, be like, well, at this point I'm just LARPing as something I'm not, you know what I'm saying?
Interesting. Yeah. Well, that can be a very real risk when you live your life entirely online. And that's something that I think we really need to be aware of. But I think that rolls right back into my previous point about being in touch with who we actually are and what we actually want and what we should and are working toward as a person and our own flaws and all that other stuff. Now, you mentioned character being destiny, and I think that's a really great quote, but I have to say, one of the things that can, well, I'll be careful how I phrase this, because there are Stoic sayings that say that hardship doesn't, you know, it doesn't change humanity per se. It simply reveals humanity for what it is. I actually am not sure if I agree with that, because, well, maybe there's something to it. It's a little difficult to tell, but as I said, you know, a lot of my heroes were confined to concentration camps, but more of my heroes also have recovered from serious, crippling problems in their own lives. Now, whether they were self-inflicted or not doesn't really matter. They recovered from them. And I have a great deal of respect for those people, because then they know that they can overcome basically whatever difficulty is in front of them, which means that if you're making them frustrated, they're not going to think it's the end of the world. They're going to see it for what it is. They're going to have that exact perspective of being like, this is just a person who's kind of frustrating me right now. Not a big deal. I've been through much worse. Like, and they're grateful for every day, because they're like, you know, I recovered from this ridiculously crippling, you know, maybe addiction or abuse. And then they're like, well, I'm alive for another day. I didn't necessarily have to be. So I'm so grateful for that. I think that being put through the crucible of hard times really is what kind of polishes people to be the best version of themselves. Now, it doesn't turn them all into the same person, but it turns them into someone who is able to tackle whatever life throws their way, which is incredibly valuable, because however nice we try to make life, however easy it is to order DoorDash, and however immediately we can get something from Amazon, life is still hard. And I think this throws people for a loop, because Matt Walsh talks about this sometimes, because he talks about a lot of the big pressing cultural issues. And he says, you know what? Life's really effing difficult sometimes. And I think this is something that people just need to come to terms with. And I think he has a point. I think that a lot of the anxiety and the depression we're seeing right now are because we expect life to be other than it is. That's dangerous. Like, for example, I think part of the problem with Andrew Tate is that he's telling guys that it's possible for them to own a Bugatti and to have, 15 girlfriends at the same time and to live wild in Romania or whatever. Not necessarily. The fact of the matter is that you're probably going to live in the US. You're probably going to earn whatever the median income is. You're going to be mildly dissatisfied with your job, at least at some point. But because of those things, because of those slight difficulties, you're going to make yourself into a better person. And Andrew Tate, instead of being like, hey, it's actually a good thing, he says, no, you should be the person who has the Bugattis and the person who has a different partner every single night. And that's just so deceitful and such a disservice to young men. Dane, as we start to kind of thinking about closing this up, what do you think would be a better message to send to young men who are so fed up with the world in general, but especially with relationships and dating?
First off, I want to say that I think more dangerous than Andrew Tate are the people that emulate him with no self-awareness. Because despite his flaws, he is strong, he is muscular, he is wealthy, he is accomplished. And I mean, his past might be tattered, and again, making disclosures for the people I hate the most in the world, like whatever.
Dane, do you think that Andrew Tate is self-aware?
That's
a really good
that's a
question.
really great question. Yes,
Is he? You think
because
he's playing an act?
yeah, absolutely. No, it's a performance. Like it 100% is a performance, and it's an enjoyable one, and that's why it's very successful, and it's a very fine-tuned one. But his fans and his clones are not. They are doing what I was mocking earlier of like, oh, you're such a Chandler, you're such a Phoebe, like you're such an Andrew Tate. You're not. You are not. You are always you. It is your right to be you. It is your right to be you. The best thing that you can do is to max out yourself to the most of your abilities so that you can be historic and someone that leaves a mark in life. And I guess my advice, I want to give advice to men and I want to give advice to women before we go off. Okay. My advice for men. If for men, it's going to be rough because you can take it and you need to hear it. You have this idea in your head that you deserve a 9 with a 0 body count that is like religiously, almost fanatically devoted to you. And if you don't got your stuff together, you should thank the God Almighty every day if you end up with a 6. And I mean that with no irony, no sarcasm, no nothing. If you are in the loving company of someone that perhaps physically isn't the most desirable one, but is loyal to you, like despite your shortcomings and whatnot, in a moment of growth, like I believe that 5s can become 10s and that 6s can become whatever. Like I believe in the growth of people and the change, and that kind of like numbers, cruel numbers game that we play and I've played like self-admittedly. I really mean that you should be grateful that a 6 has come your way, and you should really look at yourself when blessings like this come and you can't disregard them, because often what I hear from these guys is that, oh, if only someone would acknowledge me and my room for growth, while labeling something as an inferior number and then moving aside and seeing no irony in that. Okay, that is a mistake that I made constantly, and I had to eat dookie when some of those 6s became 15s, and I was a freaking idiot. And to women, go. So some advice to liberal women, some advice to conservative women. To conservative women, okay, so you're hyper focused on the kids, the house, the blah blah blah, the blah blah, and you want this like 1% guy that can give you everything you want. Had you had the humility in your conservatism to be about it and really see the potential in a guy, put your bootstraps, as they say, and grow with him and develop him, you never know who people will be. And I think, like right now, I've been engaged for like a month or two. Dude, had I met Maria earlier and we had been engaged earlier, I think like this may sound hyperbolic or ridiculous, but I honestly mean it. Like I think I'd be a millionaire by now. Like
That's
I
great.
think that the stability, the love, the support, the genuine being your utmost self with someone, like an extra 3 to 4 years of that, of this exponential growth, like like the potential is incredible. And to the liberal women, it's like, what is this empowerment coming at a cost of? And I'll just leave it at that.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think that your point to men and conservative women can be summed up in one succinct message, and that is to know your value. So for the
And
men,
others.
you need to recognize. Yeah. Well, you need to recognize that you're not necessarily going to get the 10 out of 10 that you're pulling for, right? Okay. And you need to adjust your expectations. So that's another Stoic principle, is that one of the only things you control in life is your view of how things are going to be. First of all, you need to live in the present. And second, you need to understand that your understanding of the way things might possibly be is the only thing you control. So if you go into the dating scene and you say, you know what, I'm going to find a nice lady. She's going to like me. I'm going to like her. We're going to get along just fine. She doesn't have to be a 10 out of 10. She doesn't have to be slavishly devoted to me. She just needs to care about the same things I care about and have the same life goals I do. If people
And those things will come.
Exactly. And like you were saying, Dane, being in the company of a good person, so inspiring. It's very, it's so uplifting, because this is something that I'm just recently seeing in my life too. And I'm, over 30 years old as well. It's like, I feel for the first time that I'm not going to be cut down every time I turn around. I feel like somebody's really got my back. Somebody's really pushing me, even when it's annoying, to try to make myself better, and looking for, like, telling me what my strengths are so that I can like work on that, instead of just feeling down about myself all the time and just keeping my head down and going along and doing whatever I know will work, at least for the moment. And you're right about how being in the right relationship, because it sounds exactly like what the situation you're in right now, is so freeing and so empowering. And I'm so glad this is happening for you guys earlier in your lives. Everybody is on a different time path, right? Everybody's on a different clock system. So who knows when it's going to happen? For each of our listeners out there, who knows when what you're going for is going to happen? You don't know. So to circle all the way back to the beginning of this, I think probably the most significant thing you can do to increase your odds of finding the right person for you is to keep your focus on making yourself into the kind of partner they will want to be with. So you can set in your mind the person you want and say, okay, what is this person going to need from me?
Yeah, a 9 needs a 9. Because 10s aren't real. Nothing's perfect.
Yeah, that's fair. I like that. That's a great quote. I think that's a great quote, because a 10 probably only exists in your imagination, or, on the cover of People magazine or whatever.
And they're photoshopped.
Right. Yeah, exactly. They're a 10 because they are photoshopped. But the person
someone wrote the copy for them. They're not real.
Exactly. Right. They're not real people. They're just like like you keep saying, a simulacra. And they are not real. And Andy was pointing out that Andrew Tate says, people are drawn to Andrew Tate. People that are drawn to Andrew Tate are the type that desperately wish they were confident and in shape and rich and successful. So it is just an extension of your idea about simulacra. Like, he is who they wish they could be. But instead of turning themselves into an actual person, not just this paper person who's playing a role he knows he's playing, but no one else seems to notice. Instead of doing that, they could be developing themselves into the kind of person who's a great partner.
Because by the way, I am blessed by God because I found my 9 in what I generally consider objective, like my objective 9. Like, she's young, she's freaking gorgeous, she's an incredible conversationalist. She's an artist, and she's an incredible cook, and we have the same religious and moral background. Like,
do you have the same ethnic background, or similar? You guys both speak Spanish?
Similar, yeah. We're both Hispanic.
Amazing.
And that came 60 pounds later, for like 5 years consistently going to the gym, increasing my salary x-fold, putting X amount of years, passing 30. Like, it didn't happen overnight. Like, I worked my ass off for it. And it took things like after a breakup, you and Andy being like, no, wake up this morning, you're going to church with us. We don't care if you're scared that you're going to light on fire in the church. And that day for me was humongous.
I remember that. Yeah. That's
Humongous.
awesome. Well, I was kind of sad, but at the same time, I was like, you know what? Might not be there yet. It's okay. Just kind of want to plant the seed and be like, hey, I think this is really culturally important that we go to church. Whether it feels right or not for you at the time, that's fine. That's okay. I'm so glad you're in that position. I think that you guys are really going to go far. I'm so excited for you guys. I think it's awesome. Lovely that you found this lovely young thing. And hopefully you have many, many, many happy years together. What do you think is the most positive thing we can leave the audience with?
The most positive thing that I think we can leave the audience with is that in every shortcoming, there is an opportunity for growth. And potentially, the economy might look currently bleak, and people might seem nepotistic and self-absorbed, but that only means that when you finally find your stability, and when you finally find that grounded, loving person, you are so much more likely to appreciate and understand their worth than in a time where everyone is this level-headed, interesting, utopia doesn't exist. But do you know what I mean? That it took me so long to find her that now, that we're together, I still appreciate her.
Beautiful. And I think that really ties into what I was saying about people who go through super hard times like addictions and like abuse. They come out and they're like, you know what? I'm grateful to be alive. We go through these dark nights of the soul and we're like, you know what? You know who I'm grateful is for? My wonderful partner. So glad to be where I am in life. And it doesn't matter how long it took me to get here, because now I know, looking back on all those hard times, that was developing me into the kind of person who would be a great spouse for this person, who will be ultimately a great parent. And it's really, really encouraging to see that. And I want to kind of leave people, I'm so glad you brought that up, Dane, because I want to leave people with that perspective that whatever hard times they're going through right now, if they face it with the right amount of character and fortitude, instead of this deep resentment that we see from the red pill crowd and the anti-feminist female crowd, what you will end up with is a greater amount of character than you went in with. Not resentment, not jealousy, not bitterness toward the other gender, but this increased level of personal accountability, responsibility, and a greater understanding of yourself, which will turn you into a better partner for the person who's out there for you. So I feel like that's a little saccharine, but we can end on that because it is true and very important. So, Dane, thank you so much for joining us. I know Andy was kind of hanging out on the sides there. The dot cam was kind of touch or go because of the internet, but she is out there. We will get the dot cam working. I'm very excited for that.
Dip cam.
Yeah, dip cam too. All of that stuff. Yeah. Where is he?
She loves this thing.
There he is. Oh, that's Dot. Dip, Dot. Pick your poison. Yeah,
My poison's Dip.
Yeah,
that's
fair.
Dot, but
Dot's really cute too.
We really
And yes,
miss
they
you,
both love that
and
toy.
I miss
hope
you guys.
you'll come out to visit us in Boston, or maybe we'll be down there at some point because we plan to travel a bunch. So
yeah, I will.
Let us know. We'd love to have you on the show again.
Yeah, I got a guest room.
Oh, nice!
You have a guest room. Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I have a guest room for you.
Is there a guest room for
100%
Dot
make it
though?
happen.
You just tell me, and it's yours.
Oh yeah, that's
She might
the
be with
main
the
thing.
parents.
Sure.
Of course.
Seriously,
She
sure.
can play
Why
with Boca.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. Well, Dane, we're gonna let you go. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. It's been great catching up and chatting again. We will do this again. Definitely.
Yep.
Hopefully soon. All right. I will say until next time. Bye, guys. How's it going?